We have 21 people. Thanks for joining the meeting tonight. For those of you who are new or don't know, I'm Patty Mitchell. I'm the Vice President. Josh couldn't make it, unfortunately, but he's shooting. Why he can't make it. Our program coordinator, Alan Irby, has arranged for an exciting guest photographer tonight to talk about his work. While we do have limitations doing our meetings virtually, tonight it actually is an advantage because we'll be talking from Florida, which we couldn't do normally. And in spite of being, being virtual, we've continued to grow. We're now up to 75 paid members plus one dog. or was it two?
Two.
The third dog doesn't like to photograph.
The third dog's too small for the. The third dog's too small for the camera.
So we're up to 75 paid members, spreading the word. It's great to have this platform just as a resource. What we know about photography and learning from it. It certainly has helped me a lot. One more announcement. Monday, we hung up our second show at Coffee and Beer in Pflugerville. And there's more information on the website about it. But it was for our intermediate and novice members. Had won awards last year, 2019, and not sure when it'll come down. Everything's so ambiguous right now for some strange reason. But does anybody else have any other announcements that they need to make right now? Okay. Mark?
Oh, yeah, Nick, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Our next competition will be August 6th, and it's an open theme, so everything goes. And the only limitation is the images have to be taken in the last 2 years. And we look forward to another exciting competition. We always see some great stuff, and it's really fun to see what everybody's doing, especially in this time of isolation. So the images have to be submitted to the website by the end of the day, Saturday, August 1st.
Thank you, Mark. And Alan, are you ready to introduce our speaker?
I am indeed. It is for me to introduce Phil Sandlin. I had the incredible fortune of meeting Phil while visiting my brother in Gainesville, where they both live. Phil is a retired AP and UPI photojournalist who also served as the Florida photo editor for AP. In his many decades as photographer and editor, he covered every major sport imaginable, including iconic images you will likely recognize. He covered major events like Castro in Cuba, the Elian Gonzalez custody controversy. He covered a significant number of NASA launches, including the Challenger disaster. Covered a lot of civil rights, including up close and personal images with the KKK, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers' funeral, the Selma marches, and many politicians and personalities. He has a photograph that he took of Robert Kennedy, and Robert Kennedy sent a signed version of it back to him, which you'll see tonight. Under Phil's leadership, 2 photographers won Pulitzer Prizes. So that only scratches the surface of what Phil Sandlin has accomplished, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. I expect that each and every one of you will probably recognize at least 1 or 2 of the pictures that Phil is responsible for. So with that, Phil.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me okay?
We can indeed.
Okay, well, it's certainly a pleasure to be here tonight. I appreciate y'all's invitation. And just to give you a little background on me, I was born in North Carolina and went to school there. I joined the military and became a photographer with the 101st Airborne. And then after discharge, I joined a newspaper in St. Petersburg, Florida, where I worked for a year before I got a call from United Press International, asked me if I'd go to Miami and work with them there, which I was elated, and of course took them up on the offer. And tonight, what I've got here is a series of pictures that, having met Alan, at a bird watching thing that we were doing out in the woods. It was a pleasure to find out that he was so involved in photography as his brother was, who was a close friend of mine at that time and still is. But talking with them, you know how you do when you're out photographing something or waiting for a race to start or whatever. You just sit there and tell war stories. Well, Alan got caught up in my war stories. So he asked me if I would come and speak about some of those and show you some of the pictures that I've made. I don't collect pictures, but it seems like I do here. But, you know, working with film over the years, you would expect that if you covered some big event, then you would save the negatives for posterity or for whatever you wanted to use them for. But in the case of working for a wire service, which with UPI and later with the Associated Press, you have no rights to those pictures. They belong to the companies. And so as a result, what would happen when we would cover a story, and I'm just going to point out the first picture that I'm looking at here on my desktop here is a picture of the Concorde landing. Well, that was a situation where the publicity people from the airlines called and invited the press to meet them at the airport and shoot the arrival of the airline. And at the Concorde, at the tickets places where they board the planes. And that sounded kind of boring to me. So I went out, drove out across the runways and got through a fence, walked through a fence and sat beside the runway. And I was waiting for the plane to arrive, not knowing really other than which runway it was going to land on, where it was going to land. I soon found out as it came overhead, and its landing pattern, I guess, was a very steep incline. So I wasn't sure what I was going to get, and I'm shooting with a 560 lights and telephoto lens. And as I'm watching the plane come down, there was another jet being ferried by a tractor, and he was moving in front of me. And I wanted to get up and move, but something told me not to. And luckily, the tractor pulled that other airplane past my point of view, so that just as he did, this plane here touched the ground. I had the chance to shoot one frame. Luckily, it was the frame that, and I was working for the AP at the time, and it was a frame that the New York Times put on their front page the next morning, which, having been new with the AP, I was very pleased with that. So the problem is I don't have the negative. It's in New York. So a lot of these images were either having to call New York and ask them to send me a copy down, email me a copy, or I just didn't have the image to show you for a story that might have gone with it. Now, Alan, are we on the same page now?
Yes, yeah. Seeing the Concorde.
Okay, well then we're going to go to the next image that we've got here. and it's a picture of Michelle Obama. She came to Gainesville, and at this time I had already retired from the staff for the AP, but I was freelancing for the AP in Gainesville, where I shot all the University of Florida football and basketball. So this was a job where they called me and said, she's coming in town, and would I go over and try to get some pictures, which I did. And I didn't expect them to be like this. I expected to be kind of standoffish, stuffy, whatever it was. But she got right down with them and started doing the boogaloo and whatever else there was to be done. And it was a really delightful assignment. And I did have several different pictures like this that I got, but I picked this one because I just thought it gave a flair to what she was doing. The next picture that we're going to see is the astronauts for the first shuttle launch walking out of going to the pad. And it just shows the equipment that they had to carry at that time. And when the first shuttle was announced and all, of course, we had to go up to the Cape, set up our trailers in dark rooms. And we had a situation where we would be allowed to set remote cameras out. And that is, if you're not familiar with it, where you've got your cameras on your tripod, one or two cameras on a tripod shooting maybe color and black and white. And you would set it so that the blast of the rocket taking off would set your remote camera equipment into shooting frames, and it would be set up so that it would shoot until it went out of the frame of your picture. And these were done with NASA, giving each company, AP, UPI, Reuters, etc., an escort, and you had to be with the escort when you would go out, and they just minded you while you were out. They became a lot of help to us also. But we were able AP was able to talk to NASA and have them let us get inside the fence where the rocket was going to launch from. And so we set up our cameras in where we wanted to. We were probably a couple of 100 feet from the actual rocket. And we, of course, never having done this before, set up our cameras to get the best vantage point for a view that we liked. And figured, that's great. Well, the rocket launched eventually. And we went to get our cameras, and the blast of the rocket had blown our cameras through the fences. So I don't think the AP got any pictures with this. And we had 2 or 3 cameras set up. It was either through the force of the explosion when rockets took off that it blew it through the fence, or the water, I guess it's water, some kind of chemicals comes out of there, just flooded the cameras. Life magazine, a photographer named Ralph Morse, was a little luckier than we were, and he managed to get a picture of the actual rocket igniting and the flood waters approaching his camera. And then from then on, it was nothing else but torn up camera, but he at least got a picture of it. So that was some of the lessons that early on that we learned. We had, I think the first remote setup that I had wasn't anything like we have today. I mean, today you've got them where they'll do anything. They'll catch lightning bolts or anything else. But back then, you didn't have that luck. And I had taken a friend of mine from the Miami Herald had a camera, a remote that he set up, and it was made from an alarm clock. And you cut the hands of the clock off to a point where the actual hour hand made the contact and let your camera go then. So it worked perfect for me. Alan, the photographer that gave me this thing and loaned it to me, had made up a different one. When we were setting him up, he was driving wooden spikes in the ground. And I asked him, I said, Alan, what are you doing? He said, "This is my remotes are going to be hooked onto this." I said, "Well, what does it do?" He said, "Well, sound travels a lot quicker in the ground than it does in the air." He said, "And so when it starts to go off, the thumping against my boards, which I have my contacts and my electric plug set up on, would set it off." Okay, great. I think that's fantastic. So the next day, NASA takes you out to the launch pad and lets you retrieve your film. And so when I retrieved my film and I got it, and I wished him luck, everybody scattered back to their dark rooms. I saw Alan a little bit later in the lunchroom and asked him how it worked. He said, it didn't work at all. I said, "Well, what happened?" He said, "Well, he forgot that shuttle when it was getting ready to, and it wasn't the shuttle, it was Atlas 5B, was going to launch. They pumped fuel into it at night or right before the actual launch. So from about 12 o'clock until 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, every time the motor on that pump hit and pumped gas into it or whatever they used, it set his camera off. So he had about a 36, because we were using film then, 36 frames of nothing but that rocket sitting on the pad, which was another important lesson that we learned. And there's more, I guess I can tell you a little bit later. The next picture that I've got is an eagle, American bald eagle, that I shot at a lake close by here. And it's just one of the things that Al and his brother and a lot of others go down and shoot and try to hopefully get a picture like this. This eagle was looking for something to eat, and you can see the water droplets on him because he was right sitting on a post by a lake. And he just got very excited when he started to fly off, and I just happened to capture him at that moment with a 600 millimeter lens, which pleased me a lot. The next picture you see is something else that we are involved in quite often when you work for a newspaper or for the wire service, and that is covering sports. And for that, we also use remotes for that. We set a camera up on the where the basket's located, and you've got a long line, and you just hit the button every time you want the camera to shoot. But you get some good pictures that way. But we would have to cover at least 1 or 2 games a week, and that's the University of Florida I was covering. So that kept me busy doing that, which I enjoyed doing. And this next picture is a lovely young lady sitting on the beach. She was an airline stewardess. And in the background, if you look closely, you can see a guy in a white shirt with a camera shooting a picture of a man running in the water. The city of Miami Beach has a really super publicity department, and they got tired of having just what they call cheesecake pictures, which they would call me at AP and offer me, and we would use them because the newspapers typically up north, New York Post and the Daily News, would use these pictures of these girls running on the strand or being in the water or whatever. If the weather got cold up there, they would call down to me in Miami and as the editor and say, "Can you get us something to go with this cold weather?" So we would find one of the city had a list of models who would be willing to, at the latest minute, to jump out and go with you and shoot pictures. So what happened was when they told me they had this guy doing, I said, "Well, I'm sorry, but I just can't see it." And this girl was sitting up on the beach a little ways from that. She was interested because there were TV crews down there shooting this guy running too. And so I asked her if she would mind moving her beach towel down here, and then I posed in such a way that I got what I wanted, and what the city, they got what they wanted, except it was my version of the Daily News used, which I thought was great. Now, the next picture you're going to come to is one of the Bee Gees, and the following picture from that is Diddley. and he lived right around the corner from me. I saw him and met him in the supermarket one day, and told him who I was. We got to know each other. And I got to know his daughter. In fact, I got a tripod from his daughter that belonged to him. But we used to go to his concerts, and this is one of the pictures that I shot of him doing that concert. He died not long after that, which I'm sorry to say, but it was a legend. Now the next one that we see here is the final run toward the Breeders' Cup, a horse race that they hold in different areas every 4 years, I guess it is, something. And this was being held in Miami. So I went out and shot that, and I've added a little slow shutter speed to it, so the legs would be a little bit blurry to give it a little feeling of speed and action, which we play around with the pictures quite a bit because we are typically, I was a photo editor for like 26 years, but the photographers would be very used to coming in and helping us edit these pictures. So if they had a good idea of what they thought would make a good picture, then we would have them do that. And as well as being an editor, I was a photographer all this time. So I was able to go out with them a lot of times, and we would double team it and try to come up with some way out kind of art that you just wouldn't see normally. Now, this was back in the film days, and we would get the pictures, and let's say at Hialeah racetrack, we would shoot a race and have to go in and process the film in a little room that they had for our use. And there you would transmit from a drum-type transmitter, which took a black and white picture, 8.5 minutes to transmit. And the difference it made there was that we had to make sure that at the racetracks, we were the only people allowed to have a telephone there, because everybody would be calling in, making bets or whatever. So they weren't allowed to do it. They had a telephone set up just for that purpose, which was interesting. So we covered a lot of horse races there that we enjoyed doing. They were normally late in the afternoon, so it was go to the track, get your pictures, get them on the line, and when you transmitted those pictures, basically then it was just black and white. And so you got them done, and you wanted to get out of there as quick as possible, because typically you'd have run to the closest beer house and relax a little bit. So the next two pictures, actually.
Phil,
yes,
can I interrupt you for just a second? Clay, I think you were sending text. Phil can't see text. He's on the phone. So I think if anybody has any questions, just ask them.
Yeah, if you have a question, jump in, and I'll be glad to help out if I can.
Okay, I was hoping Ed or Alan would be reading my notes here, but I'll ask one. I was just wondering, since you just mentioned about where you after you took the picture, you went somewhere and you could develop the pictures yourself. Did you print out contact sheets?
No, we didn't have any time for that jazz. No, we would run in. We would run in and process. Most everybody at that time was using 35 millimeter now, maybe 2 1/4 some, but we used 35 millimeter, and it was generally tri-X, and we would push it depending on the lighting. But the races would be held late in the afternoon, so it was getting dark sometimes. So we would have to push the film, and we were using, what I used was generally HC110 developer, and I would heat it up. Now, I have at Daytona, at the races at Daytona, one of the races one time, the drivers were coming down. They had made the turn for the finish line, and the winner had won, but the other drivers were coming in. And two of the drivers in two different cars pulled off the racetrack. Kel Yarber and one of the other racers got in a fist fight. And I had a photographer on that curve, luckily, and he shot those pictures, and he came running in, and we had to get them on the wire real quick because that was pretty good news. We never had that happen before. But the problem is that the driver had taken his car into the pit where the winter racing cars were given the checkered flag, and then they were given a hat and the trophy and all that jazz. But I wanted to get a picture moved before that took place because they would sit around and shoot the bull before they ever did all that. So I took HC 110 and heated it up to 103 degrees and processed it for 15 seconds, agitating it the whole time. And I had to dunk it in water first because if you didn't, just parts of it would be developed. But dunking it in water, it would spread real quick, and then agitating it would make sure that all the film got hit. And it came out beautiful. It was fantastic. But the problem with that is you could not depend on your clock, your watch, something like that. So if it was, I did that for time, but typically we would never do that. We would process and like I say, HC 110 Tri-X, rating it at probably, at that time, 1600 was real fast. But, and then we had to make an 8x10 print. A lot of times we would do that from a wet negative and make a print, and it was 6.5 by 8.5, I think. And then type a caption, about a 3 or 4 line caption describing what the event was. We had codes that we had to go by. Like Miami was MH, and the first picture would be MH 101. And then you would sign off the picture and say AP photo, and it would put STF staff, and then it would be my name and the caption writer's initials. But early on, in the early days, we weren't given the opportunity to use our names. We only used the copywriter's name, the guy that wrote the caption, used his initials so that if we were being sued, they would know who to go talk to about the caption, why it was messed up. But so that was that. But then we would transmit the picture. And back then, let's use the racetrack as an example again, it would be, say, 7 o'clock in the afternoon by now or something when we would get these pictures done because we were fast in doing this. But we would get the pictures done real quick, and it was black and white. Well, back then, if you're taking up 8.5 and 9 minutes transmitting a picture, the newspapers couldn't use more than 1 or 2 pictures because they had other things coming in from all over the world on these same receivers. So you had to be quick to get that done and get it out on the wire. And typically speaking, unlike today, where everything is digital, unlike today, back then, if you were first online with the newspaper, in other words, if your picture came across the Unifax or fax copy, whatever it was they were using, that would be the one that would get in the newspaper. They didn't have time to play around and look for the pretty pictures, but it was the first one across the wire that generally got the date on the your competition. So we had to go fast.
So you didn't use you didn't send a what do you call it, cheat sheet or
no.
The whole roll of film. The whole roll of film.
The photographer was the editor. He's the one that decided which picture was going to be used. And generally they did very good. I'd say we did, because I was a photographer doing the same thing. We would notch the negatives, but we would have one that we'd want to go first. And that was the name of the game. It worked like that. Now, if we would do, like, say, for instance, the Super Bowl, today's Super Bowl is incredible. We will have 7 or 8 photographers coming to Super Bowl. And as a result, we would have today, the film is electronically sent back to the darkroom, which they can do that in a millisecond. And it's sent out to the newspapers in the same way. So, and they don't shoot like I say transmit 1 or 2 pictures, AP will transmit almost 100 pictures on the Super Bowl. And sometimes there's a mistake in doing that because, let's say Reuters or UPI or whatever, your Reuters, if they had an editor who would say, I don't want to see all that film, I want to see 15 rolls, then he would have a chance to go over his film quicker and better and make a better choice than somebody trying to look at 20 rolls of film at one time. So you had to be careful about that. But back then you didn't have a choice. And so that was the way that was done. Now the next picture is just a butterfly on a glorioso or whatever they call that flower. I shot that in the backyard. I just liked the way it looked. Now we're getting on to Castro. Now the first picture of Castro, there are 3 pictures there of Castro, and 2 of them were in Cuba. And this one, the first one, was in Cozumel, Mexico. He'd come over there to go skin diving or something, I think it was. So I had a crew of 2 photographers, me as an editor, because we had writers with us. So we had the same situation going on I just talked about. And Mr. Castro was always ready for a picture, as these other 2 pictures will show you. Actually, the other 2 pictures were made during a press conference in Cuba. And Castro, he flirts with the ladies because there was a young reporter sitting just to one side of me. And in this picture here, that's basically his whole time he was having a press conference. He was sitting there making eyes at her, which gave me an opportunity to get a couple of nice frames. So there. And we had in Castro, I went to Cuba one time to cover the non-aligned conference. And that's where all these countries in Europe and so forth get together for this big meeting. The United States is not involved, but we do cover it. And we had Tito and Marshal Tito was there. Arafat was there. I mean, everybody that was anybody was there in this line of being at these big meetings. And we were given opportunities to go to shooting positions. They had guards would come out and give us a shooting position, and you had to stay in that position and say for maybe an hour. And then they would come up and say, okay, you're relieved. We're going to put somebody else here. So that worked out fine. AT had a photographer named Charles Tanznetti, and he was a Hungarian photographer, and he was a jewel, and he knew Castro. He'd covered him so many times. But Tanznetti got a shooting spot that was right over the podium. So he was shooting the best position you could be in. You could see Arafat and Tito, and then you could see Castro in the foreground. And it was a prime spot. And I asked him, hey, we're going to be hurt when you have to change your position. He said, I'm working on it. And so later during the day, I got one of the film runners came down with some film and said, Tanznetti needs a pack of cigarettes. I said, no, okay, fine. Let me run upstairs to the place, ran upstairs to the place where you could get cigarettes and got a cigarettes and brought him back down and gave him to Castro. Well, the next day it was the same damn thing. So finally I cornered him. I said, when he came out, finished with work that day, I cornered him. I said, what are you doing? What am I buying you? I didn't know you smoked that much. He said, I don't. I'm paying off the guards to keep this position. So, which was pretty good. This next picture that you're looking at is President Clinton at the time speaking at the University of Miami. And, they're waiting he's waiting to speak. and this young girl walked by. And I don't know, but what she had, maybe somebody in the crowd, and she said, you know, shoot my picture with him. So she just walked by me. She had the most beautiful expression on her face. I just, you know, it was a snap grab shot that I got. It was probably the best picture I had all day, but I thought it was neat. This next picture we're looking at is just an old shack sitting out in the bay in Cedar Key, Florida, down by the Gulf of Mexico, with this nice little sailboat going by. Now the next picture is Ben Crenshaw when he won the Masters in '95. When we cover that, the Masters is another place where you can expect we would have, say, 5 photographers there, and an editor and a processor, somebody to process the film, or lately it would not be that. It would be, give me your disc, and they would just put the disc in the machine and take the film from there. But it was a situation where when you wait a minute. So I'm sorry. Where you had a photographer, say, someone following Crenshaw all day, and you'd say 2 photographers on Crenshaw if he was in the lead. And then at the end of the day, well, for instance, at this last day, everybody goes to the 18th green, and there's a stand up there where photographers can get in the stand, look down on the 18th green, and get some good shots. But it's not big enough stand for everybody, so everybody has to move around. Now, the Masters is the only golf course that I've ever covered where the photographer cannot. The photographers cannot get under the ropes. In other words, he's only as good as the people who paid money to see the match. So that makes it difficult for us, because if you've been covering Crenshaw and he gets down on the 16th green or the 15th green, and there's probably 15, you've probably been there, but you see how much of a gallery they've got in front of you. Well, if you're lucky, you can say, excuse me, can you mind if I get through? Now, you're carrying a 600 and probably a 300 or a 180, trying to get through a crowd of people who paid good money, and now you're going to go stand in front of them. You have to be very, very careful to do that. So a lot of times, and we had on the final day at the Masters, we have one photographer who for years had this family that had a blanket sitting down right in the prime spot looking at the scoreboard on the 18th green. And they'd always make room for him. So he had a perfect deal going there, but for the rest of us, we didn't. As it happened, you know, when you go up, you look at the where the hole cup is, and then you work around there looking at some of the players who've come in before him, where they're playing the ball. So you get the best spot that you can find that you hope will take care of that, you know, hoping he's going to sink it and birdie it, and they'll do backflips. Well, with this guy's coming in and winning here, it wasn't the case, but he won. And, of course, I wasn't in the stand. I was right by the entry point where he would leave the cat course. So this is what I got, this series of pictures here that really were the best pictures of the day, with the exception of putting on the green coat. So we had to look at that situation and guess. The same thing, and I'm going to just go ahead, same thing would be true of another picture that I'll show you later. The picture you're looking at next are the 2 astronauts that you saw earlier.
Bill, can we go back to the
back up? Yeah.
The second picture of Ben Crenshaw?
Yeah.
When he's collapsing into his caddy's arms, there's a backstory that I think would be very interesting to know about.
What's that?
Isn't this the the event he won just a few weeks after his father had passed away?
Yeah. I'm so glad I talked to you before this thing came up. Yeah, that was I think that his father had died, and his father was with him all the time, and he was very close to him. The emotions just came out. So that's, and at the time I'm shooting that, I don't realize that. I'm just shooting a reaction because I've covered the Masters for years and years and years and never had seen anything like this before. I mean, I covered the Masters one time back when, in the 80s sometime, and I can't remember the golfer's name, won the Masters, but he forgot to sign the scorecard. And if it's anybody I expected to see cry, it would have been him, Roberto DeFinzio, I think his name was. But, yeah, it's something that, and we get caught up in that, I mean, you follow somebody for so long and follow them and think they're going to win, and all of a sudden something happens, they hit a tree and bounce out, and there goes their day. They're masters, so it's hard to do. The next picture, if that answers your question there, Alan.
It did, thank you.
I'm sorry. The next picture was just to show you the caption that I was talking about. On this picture, you see a caption style. That was the caption style that we had to use, saying who, where, when, and where, and who shot the picture. So we had to be careful with that, because you put the wrong thing out, then you can be sued by putting out bad information or slanderous information if it was that way. So we had to be very careful for that. The next picture was part of the flotilla when the Cubans started coming from Mariel, Cuba to Key West. I mean, it was a mess. All the people was just in the boat behind them was standing room only. As I told you earlier in introduction here, we weren't able to keep our film. So what I'm showing you are would be calls or secondhand pictures that we didn't need to send to New York for some reason. So the next 4 pictures are guards in a Cuban prison, the Cuban Combinado del Este. I don't speak Spanish, but it was a prison where they were bringing, there were some senators from the United States went over there. And the idea was that they were going to bring some people back with them, 26 political prisoners, and I think 46 families were being given freedom to come to the United States. And this was part of the guards that were in the building where they were being bought out before they got on the airplane. And I just shot some close-up stuff that I liked. The guy drinking coffee was a guard, and the other guy was a prisoner, and the other guy sitting down there were prisoners with the guards looking over them. Now, I understand this is one of their better model prisons, so it doesn't look all that bad. This next picture, I shot that of Highway 826 in Miami as the sun was going down one afternoon. I shot it with I think about a 1200 millimeter lens. I just like you never see the sun that big using real life photography. And this is a situation where, as I mentioned about the captions, if in the caption, you don't see it here, but in the caption for this picture, it was shown on the caption that this was taken with an extreme telephoto lens, which made the sun compressed in the picture and made the sun look a lot bigger than it did, because there'd be people running around early, late in the afternoon looking for that sun if you didn't let them know something. These other 2 pictures were where Alan's brother and I, and Alan's been to, I think, would go and shoot pictures of the eagles at a lake. And here they are trying to rob each other of their food. I shot that with a 600, and this place would have 6 or 7 eagles flying overhead, so you never know what they were going to do. And one day I was out there, and I had just bought this 600 millimeter lens, and Ron, who's Alan's brother, he's a Canon photographer, and I'm a Nikon photographer. So he was standing there with a 2 to 400 zoom, I think, and I've got this brand new 600 millimeter lens. And this one eagle decided to come in no farther than 10 feet from us and hit the water. Beautiful picture, except I didn't get it. I had a 600. I got his head, I think, but Ron got a beautiful sequence on that with that. So I have a special place in my heart for that lens sometimes. This other series of pictures, you see these 2 pictures here, were made in Nicaragua. I got a phone call early one morning at home, and it was the office saying there's been an earthquake in Nicaragua. Get out to the airport and see if we can get some of these family members trying to get home, or even if the next plane coming in will have family members, we can get a story and some pictures. So, okay, fine, I'll do it. So I lived in the Gables, so my airport was probably 12 minutes away. So I beat a path to the airport real quick and started shooting pictures at the ticket counter where they would be coming in at. And as I'm shooting, and I'd been there for a while, and I'm shooting, somebody had said, look who's just come in. And I look over there. It was President of Nicaragua's son. They call him Tocto or something like that. I don't know what they was standing there talking to another man. So I said, heck, so I ran over and introduced myself to him right quick and told him, I said, I was begging. I said, I need to get over to your home. I said, I need to show the world what these earthquakes have done. He was wearing, must have been a $1,000 overcoat. It was cashmere. He took it off and folded it up and handed it to me. And he said, take this out to that airplane and tell the stewardess you want me to take it home for her. So I just got the thing. I had about $2 in my pocket. Didn't have any money. Didn't have a passport. Yeah, I did have a passport because I kept one in the camera bag. But I walked out to the plane. The stewardess looked at the passport, said, get a seat. I got a seat. We flew to Nicaragua, where I made these pictures because we got there late in the afternoon. There wasn't anything to see because all the power was gone. And we went to I think they call him the Charge d'Affaires. He was a U.S.'s representative there. He was having a party serving turkey and whatever else because this was December 23rd. So it was right before Christmas, and they were having a party for big wheels in Nicaragua, I guess. Except now they had no power. And so he invited the press, all the press who were there covering the earthquake, to come to the house and have some drinks, relax, and eat up their turkey because it's going to be gone. It's going to turn bad, if you don't do something about it. So we did. Well, about, 3 o'clock in the morning, we had started getting aftershocks. And I had taken the precaution of sleeping out in the yard because I had covered the earthquake in Alaska. So I knew a little bit about what might happen. But anyway, I got out of that. Okay, nobody was hurt, but I ran to the closest hospital asking for directions. And this is what I ran into with these pictures. Now, they were operating on people out there on the grass. I mean, they had IV lines hanging, the lines hanging from the trees. Everything was done outside because the hospitals had been damaged, torn down. So I was able to get these pictures. And then I said, well, I got them. I didn't have a transmitter, didn't have a dark room, no way of getting any. Don't know when I'm going to get any. And I got a deadline. So I said, okay, fine, let's get back to the airport. Now, a friend of mine, Al Coya, who I mentioned earlier, was making the remote clock for me. He was there too, so I said, let's go back out and see what we can find out about getting home. We went out there, well, the plane was still sitting there. They told me to go sit down and buckle up. The plane flew us back to Miami. I mean, nobody said, who are you? I mean, we just got on the plane. They said, sit down, and they flew us to Miami. I couldn't believe it. So that was an amazing situation for us. I'm going to see if I can turn a page.
On a trip like this, what type of gear did you carry with you?
Well, like I said, I didn't have any gear. I went to the airport to shoot pictures of people talking.
Oh, I meant camera gear.
I never expected. But typically, I would have a enlarger. Now this is going back some, okay? An enlarger, film developing equipment, chemicals for developing film, chemicals developing prints that I'd have to make. I'd have to have a film dryer. I'd have to have a transmitter. Transmitter weighed 50 pounds. So, yeah, we had a lot to carry back then. So when you go, you expected to stay for several days. Today, to cover that same story, all I needed was an airplane to get me there, and my cell phone would work. But typically, we are our cameras, and we would just transmit just like you can do at home. There's no problem. We'd have a laptop that we put our discs in or whatever we were using and transmit, and we can transmit 30 or 40 pictures in, 2 hours.
I was really asking about what type of lens, aperture-wise, what body, and what film.
It depends on what it was. I mean, like say, for instance, if I went to, I used to have the, I don't know if many of you have one or knew of someone that had one. Nikon used to have a mirror lens, a 500 catadioptic mirror lens. Well, on a fast-moving story like that, I would take that because when I was in Nicaragua covering the war, you did not want to be seen with a telephoto lens, a long lens, because that could be misconstrued as a weapon of some kind. So you had to be very careful. But you had at least a 180 millimeter lens. You'd have your wide angle lens. So, that was basically your bread and butter stuff. If you could get the 300, yeah, you would have that, because you never know what you're going to need when you get to those situations. But if it's something like the Super Bowl, you had every lens you owned there just about, because you had your long lens on the sidelines, but you'd be covering pre-game stuff with wide-angle lenses after the game jubilation and whatever, So it's hard to say what you needed. Sometimes you felt you had what you needed, and when you wouldn't. You had to take at least some kind of flash. But, it depends on what the story was about.
Can you tell us about how you were paid in terms of a salary, or was it per picture, or was it just for the published pictures?
I was staff, so I'm paid as a salary, just like anybody that has a job.
Okay.
And we were paid every other week, I think is where we got paid, yeah.
Did it matter how many good photos, quote unquote, good photos or published photos?
No, you weren't. I mean, they kept an eye on whether you were a good photographer or a bad photographer. When you joined AP and joined UPI, you were under a 9-month probation period. So if you couldn't prove yourself in 9 months, then you would be released. So, and we had an old saying, "You're only as good as your last picture," and that's true. So we shot a lot of stuff, and we would, and the wire services are union. So you either belong to the union or you didn't belong to the union, depending on your personal feelings, and it made no difference which you did as far as whether you were used for coverage or not, because they wanted the pictures. They didn't care. That was somebody else that would argue about that.
So did you feel a pressure to always take a dangerous assignment like that?
No, I didn't.
You're salaried.
You didn't have a lot to say about it. I mean, they would call you and say, "You're going to Nicaragua." You could turn it down, but you certainly didn't want to. It's just, whatever you did, you just had to do it, and that was it. I mean, because a lot of us didn't want to do that. We had some photographers who basically were sports photographers, and that's all they wanted to cover. And I had a photographer who was a sports photographer and one of the best photographers that I knew. He was a Canadian man, and he's just really great. Well, when the United States invaded Grenada, I told him, "You're going to Grenada. New York looks at you as a sports photographer, and I want you to be able to show them you can do anything." And he went and he did a great job. So it's just that type of situation.
So the rivalry was with people from a different service. Is that right? You were all on the same team, and then the others were Magnum and the other freelance photographers.
Magnum was Magnum and Raphael Gometti and Black Star, and they weren't like AP. They didn't transmit pictures. They went out, say for instance, Magnum, a good example would be the civil rights, where, and you'll see in some of these examples I'll show you maybe, is that Black Star would be hired by Life magazine to give them 2 or 3 photographers. So their photographer would join the Life magazine crew. And of course, Life magazine, being a magazine, did not, they had to fly their film to Chicago and make prints in Chicago under normal circumstances. But now doing the civil rights, working for UPI, when they had the Birmingham church explosion, Life magazine had to get their pictures to Chicago, but they had a deadline. I think their deadline was like on a Thursday, and they started to print on Saturday. So as a result, they came to us, UPI, to process their film for them and to make wet prints so they could send to Chicago so they could make their layout. But that was unusual for one of these groups to do that. They generally would hand carry their film, jump on a jet or whatever was flying that day to take it back to where they had to, New York usually, to give them their film. Now, what picture are you looking at now?
I'm looking at earthquake victims, the lady and the little boy.
Okay. Well, let's try. That was the last one on that page for me.
Right.
Look at the next image that you would come to.
Okay.
Okay, there's a man sitting at a table.
No, it says Eastwood surrounded.
Eastwood surrounded. Hang on just a minute. Eastwood, what is the picture?
I think it's Clint Eastwood, I believe.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's it. That's the man surrounded. Yeah, that was doing the Darlington, South Carolina 500 race. I don't know how many of you enjoyed watching Clint Eastwood and a bunch of cowboys on the TV program that they had each week, which I enjoyed. It was black and white, I think. Well, they were invited to be the guest celebrities at the Darlington Raceway. And they had a raceway queen. You could see her on the left. Well, Clint was sitting there, and got something in his eye, it looks like, and she's got a napkin going to help him out with that. And I have no idea who this other person is. I'm shooting pictures and I see a head jump up. Well, I had to shoot the picture. I never was given an explanation, even though we went out drinking that night. I thought that was crazy. In fact, I don't know if you've ever seen the picture, because that's not a picture you'd put on the wire. You may be able to get away with it today with all the stuff that goes on the wire today. But back then, that wouldn't have gone on the wire. There'd been questions asked. Now, the next picture.
Phil, can I interrupt? Can I interrupt you for just a second?
Sure. Don't just interrupt.
Just so everybody knows who Elian Gonzalez is, hopefully everybody remembers. I'm going to show them the picture that made him famous.
Okay, yeah, please.
It's not one of your pictures, but
no, it's not.
Y'all may remember this picture. Okay, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to your picture now.
Yeah. Here's the situation. Let me see how I'm going to start this. When Elian was found at sea and brought to Miami, and his mother was allegedly drowned, he was taken eventually to his uncles. He has two uncles that lived there in Miami, in Little Havana, and he was taken there to stay with them because they were family. And as you all remember that watched that unfold, the argument with the United States government and Cuba and Elian's father, who finally came to the United States to argue to get custody of his kid to take back home, and the government wouldn't do it. And so the publicity on this grew and grew and grew, so that at Elian's uncle's house, at that time, when it got to be Janet Reno time, they were surrounding the house. But back then, Elian enrolled in school, and his uncle would take him to school. I had a freelance photographer named Alan Diaz who shot that picture you were just shown. He was working for me as a freelancer, and I told him, I want you to go to school with him every day. Just stay with him every day, go to school with him, and when he goes in the house, you go home, or come and bring me your film and then go home. So we did this for as long as it took. And then when things started getting hot and heavy, and the press TVs galore, they had tents set up, they had big trucks everywhere in front of Delphine's house, the Uncle Delphine. And so when Elian would come out, everybody would start shooting pictures of Elian. You know, he'd come out to see what was going on, and then he would go back in the house and so forth. And one day he came out with a Batman costume on, and the crowd just broke up laughing and hollering at him, and he thought they were jeering at him. So he ran back in the house. Well, that afternoon, when the photographer came to the office to give me the film, he explained to me, he said, man, I felt so sorry for him. He said he thought they were laughing at him. And I told him, I said, Alan, I told Alan this on the phone, not when he gave me the film. When he called me, he told me this on the phone before he got to the office. I said, Alan, meet me at my house. My daughter worked for a mall in Miami, in South Miami, and they were showing Batman movie at that time. And as you all remember, they had these big marquee things and these big cutouts in the front of the theater previewing the movie. Well, my daughter, somebody had given her that, and she had it in her bedroom. So I went home and took that out of her bedroom and gave it to Alan and told him, take it back to Elian and give it to him. So when Elian got out of school and got home that day, that picture was sitting on his wall in his bedroom. And as far as how it got there, nobody knew. They knew that Alan bought it there. I told them and Alan, please don't ever mention that it was me that gave you that picture, because I think AP probably would have fired me for doing that. But I just couldn't help seeing this kid like that under all this circumstance, and something that would cheer him up. So anyway, that was what that picture was about. And to add to that, I'll tell you about the situation with Alan. I told you all these people, the Miami News, the Miami Herald, every newspaper around the country, big newspaper, New York Times, the Washington Post, all TV, in front of that house, and they had a small home that had about a 60 by 105 foot yard, was camped around that house at the front door, because we had word that Janet Reno was about to come and get Elian. Well, late one night, Alan was sitting in the backyard with the other Delphine, the other uncle, and they heard people coming, and they saw the soldiers coming. Well, Alan, and this was already preset, Alan jumped up and ran around to the front of the house and went straight in the front door. A Miami Herald photographer was sitting with Alan, and instead of going in the door with Alan, he had a ladder set up outside so he could shoot pictures back towards the front of the house. So he went up there and got that so he could get them bringing him out. Well, Alan, when they came in the house, Alan was in the closet, right by the closet, with Elian. And when the man grabbed Elian, Alan shot his pictures. Well, the next thing I knew was a phone call in the middle of the night. Alan, the photographer, was just out of it. I mean, he was just hysterical, saying, they've got him. And I said, well, get the film to the editor. We had an editor sleeping in his car beside a telephone pole where we had paid the phone company to drop a line, telephone line, straight down to the car so he could transmit pictures from there. So he got the film and processed it, and got the pictures on the wire. We had a snafu at the same time, in that the first pictures went out as pool. They weren't pool, but that was a problem we had to solve, which we did. And it was AP's exclusive pictures inside the house. Alan was really shook up, and you figured how he would being with the kid all this time. He went to a neighbor's and hid, because he was barraged with so many calls from TV stations and foreign newspapers to interview. Then the AP told me, because when I was talking to them, they said, we don't want him to be giving interviews away. We would set it up so that they'll have to go through New York. So that's what they did. So when Alan got calmed down and everything was cool, he could give these people the interviews that they were looking for. And with the picture that Alan shot, and I said he was a freelancer, he won the World Press Photos. He won the Pulitzer Prize and quite a few other awards with that picture. Now, Alan died a short period of time ago last year. He died, and I'm not sure that he ever got over the situation that he was facing then, because it was a big responsibility. Everybody thought that he should have been fooled because he was friends with the family. Well, that wasn't the way we set it up. We set it up so that if he became friends with the family, so be it. If he didn't, that's just the breaks. But they liked Alan because Alan was Cuban. Alan lived right there in the neighborhood, so it worked out good for AP. But it's just, one of those stories that you think you'd never work, but you do. It was a great story. And so now let's move a little bit. Next one's a football picture, and you've all seen football pictures. It's just an illustration of the type of work that I did in Miami as a freelancer after having left AP. I was still doing, when I was editing and the staff for the latter part of my career there, wouldn't go to football games because they were doing their own editing, and I would be doing something else, which is good. The next picture you see, is me on a tower, setting up remotes. Now I'm putting plastic bags around the cameras, and I would have at least a black and white and at least a color and maybe another one with a long lens. From the distance that we're looking at right there, I'd probably have a 50 millimeter or something like that for the wide shot, and then a little tighter shot with a 105 for that. And you can't see, I'm in the front of, if you looked at it good, is a second shuttle up on the pad. It's the first time that they had used the new pad, which is pad B, but they didn't launch it at this time here because we had a rain or something come through that they couldn't launch it with. And so going into the coverage of the space shuttle, I'd been covering the rockets since some of the old Gemini launches. Gemini and Atlas, these were big rockets. And later, when this first started, we had a situation that have I mentioned the fact that they allowed AP to put cameras inside. Did I mention that yet, Alan?
Yeah,
Hello?
you did. Yeah, you did.
I did?
Uh-huh.
Okay, about blowing them through the screen.
Right, yeah.
Okay, well, we can pass that then. The next one, did I go catch the Challenger part? I know you know about it, but I did it. I don't know. I don't think I mentioned that, did I?
No, huh?
Oh, okay, yeah. I was going to say, give you an idea of what happened when the Challenger blew up. And my AP trailer was setting up on the launch pad where all the media had trailers or buildings that they had built. And the Challenger was being prepared to get launched. And so for the launch itself, and it was January, it was cold, and photographers had their remotes all set up, and or else they were positioned where they were going to get the best pictures they could. And I was sitting on top of the CBS building, which was adjacent to my trailer where we work from. And of course, we were concerned about the ice that we could see through our telephoto lenses of the pad, of the ice. And but you know, they knew what they were doing. So the rocket lifted off, and as it lifted off, it was lifted off from pad B, which was the first time that a rocket had been used on a launch. So it went a different trajectory than we, sitting down there right below it, had been used to. So that when Challenger blew up, to us, there were several photographers there with me. We thought they were jettisoning the solid rocket boosters, but it wasn't. It was actually an explosion. But it took us a couple of seconds before screaming and yelling that we realized what was going on. And of course, we were all trying to make sure that instead of having telephoto lens in our hands, we needed to have a smaller lens to get the explosion. So we shot that and couldn't believe what we had just seen. And then I had to run down to my trailer with my film because my photographers, I had 6 photographers that spread out all over the pad, all over the area, shooting from different angles with different lenses. 6 photographers running back to give me their film so we could get it processed. Now, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, you name it, what newspapers, were covering the launch because of the school teacher that was involved. It had a lot more interest. So newspapers were there. And what they do at that time, they set it up with us, the AP, so that we would process their film for them. And then they would take their film, go sit down and do what they had to do with it to get it transmitted. But we would process their film. So it was a battle with them to get them lined up to first come, first serve situation. And we did that. Now, it was hard as an editor, the editor in charge there. I got to tell you what happened first before that. I was at the Super Bowl in Pasadena, in Louisiana, I think it was. At the Super Bowl, 2 days before that, covering the Super Bowl. And we had a photographer from Washington, an editor, come in and take my place at Cape Kennedy. And they wanted me at the Super Bowl. So at the Super Bowl, we shot the Super Bowl, and a friend of mine who was helping us out, we decided we would try to see if we could get out that night, because I was scheduled to leave the next day. So we ran to the airport, and we were able to get flights back to Florida, which was right across the Gulf. So and then I was able to get up and get over there and replace the photographer who was acting as my editor, take his position, so I'd be the editor now. He had to get back to Washington because he was covering the State of the Union message by Bush. There's a lot of swing, because keeping in mind, we didn't know anything about the explosion that was going to happen in 6 hours. He had to get back. So he got over to the airport and was standing at the airport getting ready to get on the airplane when he saw the explosion from Orlando. Well, being a smart editor and photographer for AP, he dropped his ticket and took off and came back to the Cape to help me. So you can see how things jumped around quite a bit on a subject like that. And I told Alan about this. We had a photographer from Concord, New Hampshire, I think it was, he was a freelancer for AP. In other words, he was paid by the job at the time he was in the staff, to come down because he knew the family of the teacher. So his job, as he was explained, and I told him, your job is to shoot pictures of the family as they watch the rocket go up. I know you're going to want to turn around and watch the rocket, but you can't. We want you to stay there with the camera on them. Okay, so he did. And the rocket took off, and he shot his pictures, and we got the film back, and everybody was looking at the film. Well, by the time we got to the point where we had already transmitted pictures of the explosion from all of our photographers, we were now looking at next of kin and who we could see what next pictures. And there was this one frame, well, one or two frames of the family with their faces looking in the sky with these horrible expressions, as you could expect, looking at the sky. And so I had a guy type in the captions, and we asked this photographer, was this when the explosion took place? Well, he said, you told me not to look around. I don't have any idea. So we said, well, it's got to be. So we said, okay, fine. So the picture went out, and all the world saw the picture. And the picture that we shot of the actual explosion was humongous. I mean, it got played by every newspaper in the world. I mean, it was this color picture that everybody saw, and it was an AV picture. I said, hooray for me. What a great deal that we got these pictures. Well, I'm going to carry on a little bit more with this, is that later, a couple of months later, because I stayed at the Cape till April, later I got a phone call from my CEO of AP, and there was a question about when was the picture actually made. And a newspaper, I think it was the Boston Herald, photographer, said he thought it was made before the explosion. So AP, wanting to make sure that it was correct, we got the film from NASA of the actual video, so we could catch the timeline and see what exactly when it blew up and exactly when that camera shot was done. Somehow, I don't know how they did that, but we did, and it was proven that the AP, me, my editors, and my whatever, were wrong in that what they were grimacing over was, if you've never been to one of those launches, you're only 3 miles from takeoff. And then for that, when it lifts off, it makes this hellacious noise, and then the reverberations. If you've never seen it, you'd probably do the same thing they did. So we were wrong in that, and we corrected, even after that long a time, we sent out a correction to the pictures that we were wrong, which, but I just give you that idea. So the news is in the news now, with a lot of fake news being hollered. But unless you've ever sat in on the editors meeting in one of these big papers or AP or UPI and see how much trouble they go to make sure that there is nothing wrong, you just don't realize the trouble they go through. Anyway, the next picture for me.
I wanted to ask about the ethics, Phil. Were you allowed to crop the images at any point, or?
We're the editors. We do what we want to do with those pictures.
Okay, so you could edit it.
If it's a loose picture and you shot it with a wide angle and it should have been shot with a semi-telephoto, then we'll crop it to make it look like that. Well, the next picture you're going to look at is Wesley.
I had a question too, please. Was there any question of not publishing that photo of the family, thinking that they were in pain?
No, I don't think there was. I mean, it was any other. The next two frames would have been the same thing after the explosion, But in this one, you could see all of the participants. I mean, the mother and so forth, right there. And you're talking about a matter of 2 seconds, 3 seconds difference from where that took place to where it exploded.
Well, what I meant was it ever not publishing any of those photos because of?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Not for an event like that.
Thank you.
There may have been somewhere, but I mean, with all that was going on at that time, and I was the editor, there was no way we weren't going to publish those pictures. Now, New York could have stopped it at their end because the pictures were going to New York. So, I mean, it could have been stopped, I'm sure. Somebody could have hollered and said, don't do it for some reason. But we didn't. I mean, there are certain things that I as an editor know that I can't move on the wire. We don't typically show dead people. We don't typically show naked people. We don't typically, this type of situation. But times have changed and acceptance has changed, I guess. But back then, if it was just like the picture that Alan shot, there's no way that those newspapers who found out that it wasn't their film weren't going to use that picture. They used that picture, despite the fact that it wasn't theirs to use. I mean, you're talking a period of 5 minutes there before they found out that they couldn't use it. It was already being transmitted. In some places, somebody would have put their hand on that drum on that machine and stopped it from rolling. That would have killed it, but it didn't happen that way. So, I'm sure everybody thought about it, but it never came to my attention from New York that they shouldn't have been published for whatever reason, other than the fact that it wasn't that. I mean, we changed the caption to read that it was as they watched the launch of Space Shuttle.
The family and NASA had given permission to AP to have a photographer present, I'm sure.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that was a big deal. Everybody
Yeah.
wanted to see the first teacher. You know, it was a fantastic deal to have a teacher go up to space. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't, I mean, they didn't, nobody ever thought about not publishing it because it would hurt them, make them feel bad. That wasn't, you know, we would never hurt them in any way if we knew that it was going to, but we didn't know what was going on. We just going and shooting the pictures, moving the pictures. I mean, how many times have you seen pictures here lately of a guy, the situation we got going on now with the guys being shot in the street? You know, 10 years ago, you wouldn't have seen those pictures. Anyway, let me go back to, okay, go ahead. You got something else here?
Yeah, Phil, this is Alan. Considering that we have maybe about a half an hour left, and we haven't even gone through half of your pictures yet.
Well, let's go.
Can we skip to the civil rights issue that you covered?
Whatever you want to do.
I think the first picture that is relevant, I think, is the KKK _363. Could we start there?
Wait a minute.
It's the night shot of the Klansman under, it looks like a street scene.
Okay. The picture that I'm looking at, is that the one you're talking about, is a man carrying a little girl?
No, it's the one where there's right in the center is a white robe, and there's about 3 or 4 other Klansmen. It's a night scene, apparently, with a strobe, and it's under at the very top. You see Frigidaire appliances.
Hang on. Yeah, I'm here. The KKK. Now these were the one on the left was made in North Carolina doing a Klan rally, and the one on the right was made in Columbia, South Carolina. It just happened that picture came about because I got a phone call one evening from a Pinkerton detective friend of mine who told me that the Klan was at, and if you could see it, you would see a barbecue place. It was at a barbecue shop in downtown Columbia, South Carolina. And he said the Klan were visiting him with Maurice. Well, Maurice Bessinger was the owner of the establishment, and he was going to run for governor. And so it was said that he was mixed in with the Klan, but nobody ever come up with, credentials or anything. But I got downtown, and the barbecue store was closed, the restaurant was closed. But in the back, in the upstairs, you could see tables, and I could see these people in there. So, we waited for them to leave, and they didn't leave. So this detective started screaming at him, telling him to come on out. They wanted to talk to him. So I just waited to see what was going to happen, and they came out. Well, the minute that they saw the camera, I said, "Do you mind if I shoot a picture?" And I was talking to the guys, the guards that they had, and they said no, they didn't have a problem, but they didn't want Maurice in the picture. They didn't want Maurice wasn't involved. So anyway, I shot it, but it was just to me an interesting picture when I processed the film, because when I shot the picture, I really didn't see that little kid on the left-hand side there. And to me, he made the picture. He was curious as to what was going on in my hometown. So that was about that. You got another one? Let me go down to hitting if you go down one more line on my machine, you'll see two boys with a crate of drinks.
Yeah, the Medgar Evers after
Yeah.
funeral.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And if
Okay.
you look at the next picture, you see them throwing rocks at the police. Well, this was following the funeral of Medgar Evers, who was killed in Jackson, Mississippi, and there was demonstrations and riots going on then, and there was a situation there where the funeral, before the funeral home closed the casket, they had set it up so that Mrs. Evers and her children could come down and view the body before they buried him. And Life magazine had worked out some arrangement with the family so that he could, the Life photographer could shoot the picture of them with the casket looking at him in repose or whatever. I got involved because I had gotten the Life magazine photographer credentialed one time when he couldn't get into Selma as a UPI photographer. But what happened was really sort of ghastly, was that we went in and got positioned in there to shoot the picture, and she came walking in, and the casket had a veil, like a shawl or something, over the body, so that you couldn't really see him except as a silhouette image. And when they walked in, the assistant to the mortician or somebody walked in and pulled that over and pulled it up so that they could see his body lying in there. Well, there was a bunch of screaming, a lot of screaming and crying. I mean, I don't know if we made pictures or not because we couldn't get both of them in the picture. But anyway, we had a situation there with Life magazine, the photographer, was really upset because he had to come back and ask them to repose his picture. We weren't there. I left. I took me and the other guy, and we left. But that's a situation that you don't count on. You never can think about it happening, but it does, and that's the way it is. Now down below you see a headshot of a KKK man with a cigar. That was made in North Carolina doing a Klan rally. Now, what do you like to see here now, Alan? You gotta.
How about the picture of Mickey Mantle and Joe Pepitone?
Oh yeah, let's get to that. If you guys like baseball, I don't even know where it's at. Back a long time ago, I was working with UPI, and on my day off, I decided to go to the ballpark and see if I could just shoot some pictures. And so I got in there, and of course, with my press card, I could get down to the dugout. So I went down there. The dugout was standing facing the field because they were doing infield practice, and was just sitting there trying to think about getting a decent picture. And some of the team members were behind me, and I could hear them talking. The two players closest to me were talking, and one of them was saying that the photographer was there to shoot him on first base. And he said, no, Al, you've got me doing shortstop. Well, they were, at that time, I think Mantle had an injury to his leg, so he put him on first base or second base or something, doing workouts. But anyway, I'm shooting pictures and listening to them, and I'm 21, 22 years old, something like that. I'm saying, what the hell, I couldn't believe I'm hearing this. And then I heard somebody say, hey, kid, get this. And I had a Leica with a 35 millimeter lens on it, and it was pre-focused. I turned around and just pulled it to my eye and clicked the shutter. And that picture was what you saw. And because I didn't say a word, I only had one picture. And Mantle at that time said, hey, kid, I said, I better not ever see that in the newspaper. So that picture was never used anywhere that I know of. What we're doing tonight would have been the largest viewing that I've ever known of. But I just thought, here you got Mickey Mantle, one of them's got a cigarette in his hand. Says a lot about baseball back then. But let's see if something else.
Yeah, can you talk about Nixon at Disney World?
Nixon at Disney World. Nixon was speaking before the Associated Editors annual meeting. That was AP. Now I'm working for UPI, but I'm there covering it because Nixon was there. And so Nixon was there, and that's when we got this I'm not a crook. But that was a part of that, was that I thought was interesting that he was talking about the Watergate situation that was going on. Now there's another picture that you can see. I don't know if we've seen it or not. I'm trying to look. Yes, down at the bottom, adjacent to his two pictures of him, there is a picture of him sitting on a boat. There's Nixon to the right, B.B. Rebozo in the middle, and John Appleknap on the left. They were in a fishing, a nice boat, and they were at Nixon's house on Key Biscayne, and they were going out for a ride on Sunday. And I'd find out about it. So me and Life Magazine and the Miami Herald pooled our money and rented a boat that we could take out also. And where Nixon lived, there's a marker on the water at Key Biscayne that no boat can go beyond this big ribbon, sort of like the yellow stuff the police put out. So we sat there and waited, and we had fishing rods with us. And as the boat kept getting closer and closer, we kept saying, wait. But when it got close enough, we said, okay, grab your cameras. And we dropped the fishing poles and grabbed our cameras and started to shoot. Now, I'm shooting with a 560 millimeter lens, so I was able to get a frame, one you're looking at, sharp, even though the water was rocking up and down. These other photographers didn't have telephoto lenses, so they didn't get this picture. But there was a photographer and another boat, an AP photographer, and the Secret Service were in big racing boats, and they came charging over to us, stirring up the water like you can't believe. Well, this photographer in the other boat could get nothing because he had to hold on to the steering wheel or the motor, and his cameras with the other. So we got that. This is another picture that is just a one-time picture you wouldn't probably get again. I was lucky as I could be. The picture next to that is Goldie Hawn. She was in a movie called No Time for Sergeants, and a publicity man called me and said, "What can we do with this?" And so we set it up and made this picture of her. Let's see if this. Oh, yeah. Now here is what did I do with them? At the where did I go? I'm losing my pictures. Down at the bottom, you'll see a spider in the middle of the picture and the shuttle on either side. On the right-hand side, you'll see some demonstrators at St. Augustine going in the water, surrounded by the police. And the frame next to it, you can see some bad guys who were harassing them, trying to wait for them to come out, who later jumped on them when they did. But they were coming out, and you can see the police in the water up to their ankles. That was a typical situation in St. Augustine. The picture next to it is a man carrying a girl, and two other people helping him. And this was in the square at St. Augustine at night, one night, where the demonstrators were marching, and the bad guys, and no lights, came running out of nowhere with picket staves and axe handles, starting to jump on the demonstrators. And this picture, now for this, because of the experience I'd had there, I had anticipated it, and I had put an infrared filter on my strobe unit. And I was shooting high film infrared film back then, which was probably ASA 20. But this is what I got, a very grainy picture of this girl being injured and them carrying her out of there. Now, from a historical point, I'm going to point out I've got a caption on there. And I don't know if you can see it. Okay, can they read that?
Yeah, it's up.
Yeah, can they read that okay?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, well, here is something from today and tomorrow and how times change. And we had a style book that we had to go by. AP did, UPI did, all the big companies like the New York Times, what they rule for certain things. For instance, we used the word Negro in this picture because that's what we had to say back then. It wasn't African American, it wasn't black, it was Negro. And as you notice, it had to be capitalized also. So this was one of the things that as an editor, when you were doing this kind of a story, you had to be very sure you were following the guidelines because it could, if a newspaper printed it out of line somehow, it caused a big problem. Now, down on the bottom, I'm going to show you a picture. Here's a guy that's got his arm up in the air. He's boarding a plane. His name is Tony Cuesta, and he was one of the Bay of Pigs invaders. And he and his wife were being released, as I mentioned earlier, from that prison that we saw the picture of the guards, that he was being released to go to Miami. But what do you say? There's a picture of the Pope. I don't know if you can see that. That was in Guatemala or someplace. I'm not sure, but I climbed up on a backboard behind him to get that picture. They didn't appreciate it a lot. There's Tiny Tim, if you remember Tiny Tim and Jackie Gleason. There's a bunch of pictures, but you can see them as good as I can probably by now. There's Mother Teresa that I shot in Miami. The pictures, there's Jack Nicklaus when he won the Masters. Now that picture wasn't used on the day that it was shot for some reason. They picked another picture to use instead of it, strangely enough. But like 2 days later, the editors used it to go with the story, and that picture is probably the most used sports picture of Jack Nicklaus you'll ever see. It was interesting there for that. These two pictures next to him, next to Jack Nicklaus, they were made in Nicaragua during the war there. There's a lot there that you could look at, but there's a picture up above Mother Teresa and the football player. You see a lot of photographers shooting pictures of this was the Queen's husband, Queen of England, and he's giving this little girl at a local children's hospital. And all these photographers are shooting pictures, and I don't know why I got to sit on the other side, but I was on the other side, and I asked him, I said, "Excuse me, sir, could you bend down lower so we can get a tighter shot?" He said, "Why don't you back up?" So, and here is this picture up here is Harvey Gantt when he entered Clemson College. He was the first black man to enter Clemson College. I'd covered 3 of those type situations. Some of them, they were all pretty tame. Can you see anything else that you, Ed?
I'm looking. Let's see. You actually, yeah, you had. Here's a picture that kind of goes along with what we were doing before. The one setting up remotes.
Yeah, which picture is that?
That's the name of it. Setting up remotes. You're on somebody's shoulders.
Okay, yeah, that was.
Can you see it, Alan? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that was setting up a remote to shoot the shuttle, and we were not too far away from that. So what we were looking for in that picture, and just you've got a wide angle lens, and then once again the color in the black and the white. What you're expecting to get is you're looking for good reflections in the water, so you get a double image of the shuttle going up. And I don't know if there's one to show here or not, but anyway, in this particular situation, we were hammering a steel rod in to mount cameras on, and Smart and me, I had forgotten to consider that the tide was going to come in. So we set the cameras up and left them, and I'd forgotten. So the tide came in and just swallowed the camera. So we ruined some cameras that way. Let me point out the picture next to that on the right. That's the Shah of Iran. And that was a situation where he had advocated from his country in 1979 with his family, and was at one of the Caribbean islands waiting to find out what the U.S. was going to do and whether they were going to accept him or not. So I got word about it and flew over there, and there were several other photographers there. And so we started in the morning when we got there, started shooting pictures. We couldn't see him. He was way down the beach with his kids, and they had a couple of Great Danes, and they were playing with the dogs, but they were so far away with even the telephoto lenses, we couldn't shoot the picture. We couldn't get anything that showed them. So, I mean, we waited and waited. So finally, I saw a Secret Service agent there and asked him if he would, I got with the other guys, other photographers, if we could get together and make an alliance, that we sat down and wrote him a note and asked him if he would let us come up and shoot a picture, we would all get on the next plane back for the USA. And so he did. I mean, this was just one of several pictures that we made, but they let us shoot him, and then I was on that next plane, man. I didn't here again, I didn't have any darkroom gear or anything else, because this was one of those things we didn't know if we'd ever see him once we got over there. So that worked out pretty good. This picture over here, the other side of the picture of me in the water, is a picture of inside of a church as they were having their meetings during the civil rights era. I can be seen in a white shirt across on the other side. It's a fuzzy picture. I didn't shoot it, but it's on the other side. But to show you how crowded it was in these churches doing there, because the church was the main place that these people had to go in these towns like Selma and Birmingham. And I would go to church 7 nights a week, because they would have Martin Luther King would be there, or Ralph Abernathy, or one of the leaders of the movement would be there. So we had to cover him just in case something happened while he was there, which it, thank God, never did while I was there. So that was a nightly chore that we had to go. I felt good. I was always accepted, and I've never had any problems with anybody telling me anything bad. Here's a picture right here. Up here you see the sunset with the dandelions, and 2 pictures over to the right, you see a crowd of people bending down over a woman crying. That was made at Florida State Prison, and that was the parents and relatives of a young guy named Diaz, who had committed murder and was being executed. And that was another part of working for the wire service that I had to do. The wire service, the AP is type of a situation where the New York Times, the Washington Post, Chicago, they own the AP. So as a result, when a newspaper, something like this goes on, these executions would go on, and they would want coverage of it. They wouldn't have to send their photographer 800 miles to cover it. They would just call AP and says, go down and shoot these pictures. So that's what I did. And I would shoot maybe 1 or 2 a month of different people being executed. I covered an execution one time as a young photographer in Columbia, South Carolina, where 2 men were being executed. And I was asked if I wanted to be a witness, and I was scared to say no, so I said, okay. And I went to the prison, and the first guy had killed a grandmother and her granddaughter after she had taken her out of the state hospital to take her to a movie on her birthday, and he had killed her. And so he was going to be executed, and they asked him if he had anything to say before they executed him, and he said no. And then the next person was a young 18 and 19-year-old black kid who had stabbed a liquor store dealer to death when he and a bunch of his buddies had gone in to rob it, and the liquor store dealer had grabbed hold of him, and he couldn't get out, so he stabbed him to death. And they asked him if he had anything to say before they carried out the execution. And he told them that, yes, sir. He said, if you people out there watching this today don't want to be in this same position I'm in, watch the company you keep. And that struck me hard. I always remembered that. I find it to be very true. The company you keep can influence a lot of things, but they weren't allowing any photographs to be made back then, so I didn't have a camera with me. Let's see if there's anything I can bring up that you might want to.
So, Phil,
yes,
I just wanted to ask, you were a photographer, a photojournalist, how many years then? But a long time. And
well,
did you get up every morning? Did you get up every morning looking forward to the day? What was your philosophy about the job? Was
never knew what you were going to cover. You know,
okay.
I mean, I went to cover some sports activity in Jamaica. I think it was Jamaica. And I got an invitation at my hotel. The Queen of England would like to have me come by and have a drink and cookies with her, which she had her boat, the Britannia, I think is the name of it. And they had invited several members of the media to join them on the boat, and a very elaborately dressed guard met us at the stairway and offered us a drink, and we sat down and ate little whatever cookies and stuff, and then he walked over and got me by the arm and asked me if I'd like to come over and talk to the Queen, and I did, and I didn't know what the hell to say. Still don't know what the hell to say, but I thought it was a fantastic situation there, and I was really proud of myself for having been able to do that, go and meet her.
Do you think the celebrities that you do and met treated the photographers well?
Most celebrities do. Now I got 2 pictures down here. You'll see a girl sitting there, this black and white girl sitting there with a hand over her mouth. That's Joan Baez. And the next picture also is Joan Baez. And the pictures were made 10 years apart. The one on the right with her fingers up by her lips, she had been to Brazil, and, you know, she was pretty outspoken on civil liberties and stuff. And she got booted out. And I heard about it on the radio. And so I ran to the airport and met the plane. And I was running down the steps toward the planes. And here she was coming up the steps. So she invited me to go to the lounge with her and sit down because I thought I wanted to shoot some pictures. And shoot pictures. And, you know, she was very nice. And I finally decided I'd better let her go to sleep. The picture next to that is Harry Belafonte and Joan Baez singing. Now, that picture was made in Montgomery after the night before the Selma March entered the Montgomery to the state building. But they had a big get together, and celebrities and singers and everybody were there the night before to for the marchers, say you've done a good job. And on the Selma March, I rented a truck and put 2 cots in it. And me and another photographer took turns driving the truck and taking pictures on the Selma March. And at night, they would set up their tent, and I would back the back of the truck up to the tent. And I had a bottle of liquor stowed away, and we would offer them drinks. Those that wanted it would sit down and have a hello type situation. There's a picture of Martin Luther King marching with the flag behind him in the center by the guy with the bottles. That was during the Selma March, and the guy that he's with is, I think his name was Nelson Aldridge, and he was John D. Rockefeller's nephew, and he was one of the guys who would come by and tip it a little bit, I think, at the march. Some of the celebrities we would see that would come up and just sit around and talk because there wasn't anything we could do. Our darkroom was over at a different place, so we couldn't process film at that time until the runners would come pick it up. But anyway, that's
I have to ask you about this one picture. It's this old gentleman with a ice cream cone.
Yeah, I was in Peru, Lima, Peru, and I had I was traveling with Rosalind Carter. We were leapfrogging. Rosalind was going from one country to the next, and me and another photographer, he would catch it in one place, and then I would skip over him and go to the next place and catch her. So we were doing that, and I saw this guy. I was putting cameras in the car, a cab, and he was just sitting there watching me, and I just thought it was a funny picture. That was an interesting trip. And that was where I had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to get shot doing this trip so I could make it to the next country where she was going to go. So there's always something that was going on that you didn't count on. But it was always fun. I mean, I never knew what to expect. My office in New York would call my wife sometimes and say, okay, he's okay. He'll be home soon. Don't worry about him, especially covering Nicaragua when the war was going on. But it was good. There were lots of interesting situations that would take place that you don't want to talk about sometimes, or you couldn't talk about. But it was fun. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I worked for UPI for 13 or 14 years, and I worked for AP for something like 28 years. So, give you an idea how long I was there.
Long career.
It was, but I enjoyed it. I was based in Columbia, South Carolina for like 3 years doing the civil rights, and then I was based in Miami for the rest of the time. So in Miami was the most outstanding city to be in for news. Everything. You never knew what you were going to do. I was standing there watching with Nixon one time at a 4th of July parade, and at Key Biscayne, and he and his wife Pat were seated in the midway on the street, sitting down watching a little parade, not a big parade, just a little parade for Key Biscayne. And they were sitting down there watching that, and the photographer was standing beside me, was a photographer with UPI. No, he was with UPI. I was with AP at that time. But Nixon turned to us and said, Cancey, the guy's name was Frank Cancelleri. He said, Cancey, come here a second. Now, Cancelleri typically would have had another guy there with him from AP, not me, but a guy from Washington with him. But he had a throat operation. He had cancer, had a throat operation. So he he was convalescing. And Nixon was getting ready to go to China. He turned to Cancey and just said, how's he doing? He's doing okay. Would you ask him if he'd like to go to China with me while he's convalescing? And Cancey said, yeah, I'll ask him. And he did. I don't know if he went or not, but he did. But, you know, that was something that I had never heard of, seen myself, you know, a president coming to a photographer who they don't like us generally, and asking him if he would like to, you know, go with him on a trip, because it was a historic trip to go. It was the first time they'd ever been to China. But, yeah, it was interesting.
How did you take the picture of Mother Teresa?
She came to Miami and had gone down to an area of Miami to just walk around and visit the people.
Do you know how the picture was used in the story, or was it put with other pictures, or was that the story picture?
No, I don't know. Depending on, you know, I mean, being in Miami, the Miami Herald was there, so they would have had their own photographers. But, you know, in New York and Washington, they might have used it. A lot of times we get a chance to see what's used. A lot of times we get rocketed by our office saying, UPI showing with so-and-so. In other words, where's ours? Why didn't you get that picture, you know? And sometimes it's just a shoulder difference of why an editor will choose their pictures and not ours. I got caught in a situation like that. Some of you might remember when the kid in Dallas, in the tower in Dallas, killed all those people. His father was in Palm Beach, and I went to Palm Beach to shoot pictures of his father at a press conference. And as I'm shooting the pictures, I noticed the father talking, but to an angle beside him and behind him was a woman, a girl, and a boy crying and hugging each other. So I put myself in a position that I'd had a straight-on shot with the father in the foreground and them to one side in the background. And my competition hadn't seen that. But when they saw it, they kept trying to move me out of the way so they would have that picture. And I'm sorry, but competition was competition. It didn't happen.
Well, Phil, this has been amazing. And unfortunately, you know, we could have done this for 4 hours. I mean, the stories are great.
Next time I'll get more pictures.
Is there any other words of wisdom you want to leave for us?
Well, I don't have any words of wisdom, because I think that you guys as photographers with today's cameras, I use a Nikon D5, I think it's called. And I bought one of their new mirrorless cameras, a C7, and I had to give it up because it had some problems with it, and the electronic focusing was a problem with me. I'm used to seeing things in real life, and this had a different jolt to it than I'm used to. But I just sent yesterday my grandson a 300 and a 105 lens to go with a F100 Nikon that I'd sent him. He wants to he's into photography slightly, but he's got regular cameras, but he wants to start shooting black and white. So I had all this black and white cameras and lenses that I used before I went to digital. That I said, you know, it's going to sit here and rot, so I sent it to him. And hopefully, you know, he could find an outfit like yours where you have a club that he could go to and learn, you know, because he certainly doesn't know a lot about shooting black and white pictures. But he's got the equipment he can do it with. Are there places where you can buy black and white film now?
Yes, you can buy it online. In fact, I've got a roll of HP 5 100-foot roll in at my house.
Okay, good. Well, I have a Nikon film scanner that wasn't putting out the sharpest images when I scan them, so I think I'll send that to him, and hopefully he can get mixed up with he lives in Atlanta, so I'm sure there's photo clubs in Atlanta he could get hooked up with. It'd be great. But
Well,
I can't think of anything. I'd like to have seen you guys.
Well,
Yeah.
Phil, I'm gonna make a video of this and put it on YouTube. I'm gonna send you a link when it's up there. So
Please do.
hopefully,
Yeah, I'd like to see what it comes out.
it'll be in the next day or two.
Could you guys hear me okay?
Oh yeah.
I hope I didn't stutter too much.
Good sound, Phil.
Nope.
Thank you.
It was
It
great.
it was a privilege to see your photos.
Well,
And thank
I
you.
certainly appreciate it. I didn't know I had that many pictures, and I certainly didn't know I had an audience that would be willing to look at them with me. But I
Oh, yeah.
appreciate that. I really do. And,
Excellent. Really, thank you.
Alan, I hope I see you down here soon.
yes, me too.
So, okay, I guess I'll let you guys get back to your goodies and go have that beer.
All right. Thanks a lot, Phil.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
you, Phil.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.